Lyra and the Emerald Valley. Once upon a time, far, far away, beyond the towering crystal mountains and the dense forests of whispering waters, lay a world woven from laughter, light, and the tenderest hues, the Emerald Valley. It wasn't merely a place, but a living, breathing entity, its heart beating in rhythm with joy and harmony. Here, rivers flowed with waters sparkling like liquid emeralds, yet tasting sweeter than milk and honey, their banks strewn with the finest sugar crystals, delightful to walk upon barefoot. The trees didn't just bloom, they burst forth in rainbow blossoms, shimmering with every shade of sky and sunset, from azure to crimson, from golden to magenta. The air always carried the enchanting scent of wild strawberries, forest mint, and rare fairy orchids, whose petals glowed with a soft, inner light. In the Emerald Valley, there was no cold or harsh winds. Here lived the benevolent glowworms of gifting, who carried pure, unadulterated light within their tiny bodies, illuminating the darkest corners and offering warmth. Their twinkle was so gentle it seemed as if the very stars had descended to earth. And there were also the affectionate fluff-winged flyers, resembling small clouds with soft, velvety wings that chimed melodically in flight, filling the air with music. Amidst this splendor lived a small, yet extraordinarily brave girl named Lyra. Her cherry-colored hair curled around her sweet, freckled face, and her eyes, two sparkling emeralds, gleamed with curiosity, boundless kindness, and a mischievous twinkle. Lyra lived in a cozy house beneath the boughs of a singing cedar with her beloved grandmother, Lyra the herb mistress. Lyra's hands smelled of medicinal herbs gathered at dawn, and her tales were the most captivating in the entire valley, full of ancient secrets and wisdom. Grandmother taught Lyra to see beauty in every flower, to hear the whisper of the wind, and to understand the language of animals. Lyra's best friend was the mischievous Squirrel Whistle-Tail. He earned his name from his habit of comically arching his bushy tail when he was excited or happy. Whistle-Tail loved jokes, always carried a tiny acorn whistle on which he played the most amusing tunes, and was ready for any adventure if it promised a bit of fun or some nuts. The arrival of shadow, the fading of colors. One sunny morning in the Emerald Valley began as usual. Lyra, humming her favorite song about the sun and dew, was collecting morning dewdrops from bellflowers for her grandmother's magical tea, which brought vigor and clarity of thought. A gentle breeze playfully ruffled her cherry-colored hair. But suddenly, over the clear, cloudless sky, a dark, swirling cloud appeared. It was so vast, so gloomy and ominous, unlike anything anyone in the Emerald Valley had ever seen. It swallowed the light, like a giant hole in the sky's fabric. From within the depths of the cloud came a deep, mournful sigh, like a dying breath, shaking the ground beneath Lyra's feet, and the delicate bellflowers momentarily ceased their chiming. And then, as if by a terrible enchantment, all the rainbow flowers, which just moments before had shone with every hue, instantly lost their vibrant color, becoming dull and gray, like dust. Even the melodic buzzing of the fluff-winged flyers fell silent, their wings grew dim, and the glowworms of gifting stopped shining, their tiny lights extinguished, leaving them as small, dark lumps. This was the evil Sorcerer Mractus, the envious and embittered ruler of the dark marshes, a world where sunlight never penetrated and eternal gloom reigned. Mractus had long envied the beauty, joy, and carefree nature of the Emerald Valley. He could not bear the bright colors and endless laughter, which were alien to his dark nature. And so, he decided upon a terrible deed, to steal its colors, light, and laughter, plunging the valley into the same unending sorrow that he himself endured. His shadow fell upon the valley, and the world, which only a minute ago had been alive and sparkling, became bleak and mournful. Alarm in the valley and the summoning of the Great Council. A whisper of alarm, turning into a low moan, spread through the valley. The inhabitants, usually so carefree and cheerful, now stood with bowed heads, their faces pale, their eyes filled with bewilderment and grief. Even the usually undaunted Squirrel Whistle-Tail curled into a ball on Lyra's shoulder, his whistle emitting a faint, sorrowful squeak. The elder of the valley, the wise owl of wisdom, whose feathers, usually shimmering silver under moonlight, now appeared dull and gray, called all residents to a great council at the foot of the great oak. This oak was the oldest inhabitant of the valley. Its roots delved deep into the earth, and its crown touched the heavens. Beside the Owl of Wisdom stood the most revered residents of the valley. Gnome Blacksmith Thunderoak, whose hands, usually smudged with soot from his forge, now hung helplessly. His face, typically stern, was filled with sadness. Despite his gruff exterior, Thunderoak's heart was pure gold, and he was always ready to help. Fairy Weaver Melody, whose delicate, translucent wings once shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow, were now dull and almost invisible. Her usually melodious laughter had ceased, and her magical threads, with which she wove the most beautiful patterns, had lost their brilliance. Water Elemental Neris, usually frolicking in the milk and honey rivers, now stood, transformed into a lifeless droplet, its water no longer sparkling. Even the fastest forest hare messenger Swiftfoot, who always delivered news with incredible speed, now moved slowly, his paws heavy. Children of the Valley, proclaimed the Owl of Wisdom in her deep, yet trembling voice. A great sorrow has befallen us. The Sorcerer Mractus has stolen our joy, our colors, and our magic. The valley is withering, and soon it will vanish entirely if we do not act. The owl spoke of an ancient prophecy. Only one who passes the 3 trials of the forgotten colors can restore light and vibrancy to our valley and banish Mractus forever. She explained that these trials were bestowed upon the valley by its ancient guardians, and they demanded not only courage, but also wisdom, purity of heart, kindness, and self-sacrifice. Stories of the trials had been passed down through generations, and all knew they were exceedingly difficult, fraught with dangers and cunning traps. The owl's words hung in the air like a heavy shroud. Everyone was afraid. No one dared to step forward. Some fluff-winged flyers quietly wept, their tiny paws wiping away tears. But Lyra, despite her young age and delicate build, stepped forward, her emerald eyes burning with an unchildlike determination. "I will go," she declared bravely, her voice surprisingly firm. Squirrel Whistle-Tail immediately leaped onto her shoulder, his bushy tail slightly wagging, ready for any adventure with his friend. Grandmother Alara approached Lyra, embraced her, and placed a small, polished river stone in her palm. "This is the stone of memory, my child," she whispered. "It will help you recall all the good that exists in our world when things become truly difficult." The first trial, the riddle of the whispering winds in the Labyrinth of Singing Moss. The first trial awaited Lyra and Squirrel Whistle-Tail in the Labyrinth of Singing Moss, located on the western side of the valley, at the foot of the Crystal Mountains. The entrance to the labyrinth was an archway of ancient, moss-covered stones, which now appeared dark and menacing. The moss here was so soft and fluffy that it felt as if one were walking on the most ethereal clouds, but the labyrinth's walls, composed of gigantic, intertwined ferns, gnarled roots, and tall, gray stalks of unknown plants, constantly shifted their positions, confusing travelers and leading them into dead ends. And the swirling winds, gusting through the labyrinth, didn't just rustle. They whispered riddles that needed to be solved to find the correct path. Lyra and Whistle-Tail carefully entered the labyrinth. Immediately, a stifling silence enveloped them, broken only by the whispers of the wind. What falls and never breaks, yet can shatter the strongest stones if it falls long enough, whispered the wind, its voice sounding sometimes like a gentle breeze, sometimes like a mighty hurricane. Lyra felt a shiver of unease. Whistle-Tail fidgeted on Lyra's shoulder, scratching behind his ear, trying to think of an answer, his tiny eyes darting restlessly. They wandered through the labyrinth for several hours, encountering dead ends that vanished as soon as they turned away. From time to time, the wind posed new riddles, but Lyra sensed that they all led to the same answer. What always moves forward but never arrives, whispered the wind, and Lyra thought of time. What, the more you take, the more you leave behind, came the next whisper, and Lyra thought of footsteps. All these riddles were about something intangible, yet powerful. Lyra was initially bewildered, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked around, trying to find a clue. Suddenly, she saw a small puddle of water, left over from the night's mist, which the dull grayness had not yet absorbed. Water slowly dripped from a fern leaf, leaving tiny, yet visible indentations on the stone beneath it. And then, it struck her. She remembered Grandmother Alara's words, even the smallest drop, if persistent, can wear down stone. She realized that all the riddles were connected to something constant, unstoppable, and unchanging. She looked at the gray sky, which until recently had provided life-giving moisture. And then it dawned on her. She smiled, her heart filling with certainty. "Rain," she exclaimed, her voice ringing clearly through the labyrinth, echoing off the mossy walls. "It's rain. It falls and never breaks, it constantly moves and arrives, and the more there is of it, the more traces it leaves behind." At that very instant, the labyrinth walls, as if alive, stirred, parted, and dissolved into the air, opening her path to the next trial. The sun, though dim, still peeked through the clouds. At the exit, a small, yet majestic spirit guardian of the moss, woven from green threads of moss and forest herbs, awaited them. He nodded to Lyra in respect, his eyes, like two green glow-worms, shining with approval. He extended a hand to her, offering a tiny, yet radiant crystal of wisdom, which emitted a soft, warm light. "It will help you see the truth where others see only deception," whispered the spirit guardian. Lyra carefully took the crystal and tucked it into a pouch on her belt. The second trial, the dance of the fireflies at the Starlight Waterfall. The path to the second trial led through the whispering groves, where trees, usually filled with the chirping of birds, now stood in silence. Lyra and Whistle-Tail walked, surrounded only by the rustle of fading leaves. The crystal of wisdom, given to her by the spirit guardian of the moss, gently pulsed at her waist, guiding her in the right direction. The second trial brought them to the majestic, but now sorrowful, starlight waterfall, whose waters once sparkled like thousands of diamonds, shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow, and each falling drop emitted a soft, melodious chime. Now, the waters were dull, gray, and lifeless, their descent silent, as if a heavy curtain of sorrow had fallen. Here lived special firefly dancers, who knew an ancient and beautiful dance capable of filling the world with joy and light, but due to the sadness brought by Sorcerer Mractus, they had forgotten its movements. They sat on the rocks around the waterfall, their tiny lights barely flickering, like minuscule, dying embers, their small bodies hunched. To pass further, you must help the fireflies remember the dance of joy, whispered a voice emanating from the very heart of the waterfall. It was the water nymph Aquarial, whose beautiful form, usually woven from water spray and shimmering light, was now almost invisible amidst the dull, lifeless currents. Her voice was filled with sorrow. Lyra approached the fireflies. They looked so sad and lost, their tiny antennae drooping listlessly. Whistle-Tail tried to cheer them up with his whistle, but the sounds that came out were only hoarse and mournful. Lyra remembered how her grandmother, Lyra the herb mistress, always said that joy is the strongest feeling, capable of melting the coldest ice and dispelling the thickest darkness. She thought of the laughter of children, the melodic chime of the fluff-winged flyers, the warmth of the sun. Lyra closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to hum a cheerful, yet gentle melody, the very one she sang while gathering dew. It wasn't just a song. It was a song from her heart, filled with all her love for the valley and its inhabitants. She danced lightly, her movements simple yet full of sincerity, grace, and pure light. She imagined every flower blooming again, every drop of water sparkling. One firefly, the oldest and wisest, lifted its tiny head, then another. Its minuscule light began to flicker a little brighter, like a spark of hope. It weakly wiggled its tiny legs, trying to recall a movement. Lyra continued to sing and dance, her energy transferring to them. Gradually, one by one, the fireflies began to join her, remembering their movements. Their dance steps were awkward at first, but with each note, with each of Lyra's movements, they grew more confident. Their lights, initially dim, began to flash brighter, filling the air with warm, golden light. Soon, the entire waterfall shimmered as if thousands of stars had fallen to earth. The fireflies performed the most beautiful dance imaginable. Their synchronized movements created mesmerizing patterns in the air, filling it with chimes and magic. The waterfall sparkled again, its water singing its ancient, joyful melody once more, and Nymph Aquarial, now radiant again, emerged from the spray. She smiled at Lyra and gave her the necklace of pure laughter, made of shimmering water droplets that emitted a soft, cheerful glow and a tiny chuckle when moved. This necklace will always remind you of the power of joy and laughter, child, whispered the nymph, her voice clear and pure as a mountain stream. The third trial, the mirror of wishes on the mountain of sleeping clouds. The final trial was the most challenging and required true purity of heart and selflessness. The path to it led through the soaring cliffs, where gravity seemed almost non-existent, and Lyra had to use her agility and the crystal of wisdom to find a safe way. Whistle-Tail clung tightly to her hair, his whistle silent this time. Lyra and Whistle-Tail found themselves before the Mirror of Wishes on the summit of the Mountain of Sleeping Clouds, the highest and most mystical point of the Emerald Valley. The mountain earned its name because its peak was almost always enveloped in thick, motionless clouds, which were now also gray and heavy. The mirror was ancient. Its frame was made of an unknown dark metal, and its surface was murky, as if covered by centuries of sorrow and dust. The mirror could show the most cherished, most secret desire of whoever looked into it. But there was one very important catch. If that desire was selfish, greedy, or caused harm to others, the mirror would forever hold the one who looked into it, transforming them into a part of its gray, bleak surface. Beside the mirror, curled in a massive coil, sat the wise mountain dragon Onyx, whose scales were the color of the night sky, and whose eyes were deep, bottomless lakes of ancient knowledge. He calmly observed Lyra, his breathing warm and steady. "Show the mirror your true desire, child. But remember, it must be as pure as a mountain spring, and as selfless as nature's gifts. Any shadow of selfishness, and the mirror will consume you, as it has consumed many before you," the dragon rumbled, his voice deep as thunder, yet soft. Lyra approached the mirror. Her heart beat rapidly, like a hummingbird's wings, but she knew what she wanted. She tightly clutched the stone of memory given by her grandmother, and the necklace of pure laughter tinkled softly at her neck. She looked into the murky surface, and the mirror slowly, almost reluctantly, began to reveal images. It did not show her personal riches or glory. It did not show her becoming queen of the valley or the owner of all treasures. It showed her home, the Emerald Valley, full of bright, vibrant colors, shimmering with every hue, its rivers sparkling with milk and honey, its sky once again radiant with rainbows. She saw her happy grandmother, Lyra the herb mistress, once more brewing her magical concoctions, her face radiant with joy. She saw all the inhabitants of the Emerald Valley, Gnome Blacksmith Thunderoak laughing at another joke, Fairy Weaver Melody whose wings once again shimmered with all colors, Firefly dancers swirling in a joyful vortex of light, and fluff-winged flyers whose chimes rang in unison. She saw Whistle-Tail playfully chasing fireflies, his whistle playing the happiest tune. This was her most cherished desire, to restore joy, light, and colors to all the inhabitants of her beloved valley. She wanted nothing for herself, only for them. Her eyes filled with tears of happiness at the sight of these images, and she reached out to the mirror, wishing to embrace all this beauty. At that very moment, the mirror flared with a dazzling, pure light that pierced even the darkest corners of the sky, dispelling the last vestiges of gloom. It radiated incredible warmth, happiness, and life-giving energy. Lyra felt a vast, revitalizing force returning to the valley, and her heart swelled with jubilation. The shadow that Mractus had cast upon the valley dissipated like morning mist. Mountain Dragon Onyx nodded, his eyes gleaming with approval, and a golden spark flickered across his ancient, dark scales. He extended his clawed paw to Lyra, and in his palm appeared a single, yet incredibly beautiful phoenix feather, shimmering with all the colors of fire and rebirth. "This feather will always show you the way, child, and it will never fade as long as your heart is filled with kindness and hope," the dragon rumbled. Epilogue: The Return of Colors and Eternal Joy. When Lyra, holding the shimmering crystal of wisdom, the cheerfully tinkling necklace of pure laughter, and the iridescent phoenix feather, descended from the mountain of sleeping clouds and returned to the Emerald Valley. All the inhabitants gasped. The world had changed. Mractus's cloud, which had hung over their home for so long, had vanished without a trace, as if it had never been there. The rainbow colors had returned to their places, becoming even brighter, richer, and more beautiful than before. The Emerald Valley once again shone as if bathed in streams of pure light. The rivers once more flowed with milk and honey, their banks again sparkled with sugar crystals, and the air was filled with the fragrance of wild strawberries, forest mint, and blooming fairy orchids. Music returned to the whispering groves, birds sang there again, and in the starlight waterfall, the water sang its ancient, joyful song. Sorcerer Mractus, stripped of his power, vanished forever into oblivion, dissolving like smoke. His dark magic could not withstand the purity and power of Lyra's benevolent wish. The valley's inhabitants rushed to meet Lyra, embracing her, thanking her, and praising her to the heavens. Lyra the herb mistress held her granddaughter tightly, her eyes shining with pride and happiness. Gnome blacksmith Thunderoak lifted Lyra into his arms, fairy weaver Melody wove her a wreath of the most beautiful, freshly bloomed fairy orchids, and the glowworms of gifting and fluff-winged flyers organized the brightest and most joyous celebration imaginable in her honor. Lyra became a true hero of the Emerald Valley, and Squirrel Whistle-Tail her loyal and brave assistant. She proved that even the smallest girl, if she possesses a brave heart, pure intentions, and boundless kindness, can overcome the greatest difficulties, dispel the darkest sorrow, and bring back colors and laughter to the world. And from that day forward, Lyra and all the inhabitants of the Emerald Valley lived long and happily, always remembering that true strength is not magic or wealth, but kindness, courage, and genuine care for others. And every evening, when the first stars appeared in the sky, the glowworms of gifting lit their lights, the fluff-winged flyers melodically chimed their wings, and all together they remembered Lyra, the little girl with emerald eyes, who brought colors and laughter back to their world, and whose feat was forever etched into the history of the Emerald Valley.